Hello everyone, Yom Tov, and welcome back to Wednesday Folk Tales. Hope everybody's doing well today, and I hope you're all sitting ready, comfortable with a cup of tea or maybe a soft drink, and you're just sitting with your feet up, ready to listen to the stories I've got for you today. Now, by a sort of a semi-popular request, I've been asked to read the story of Snow White and Rose Red. This is by the Brothers Grimm. Now, this is not the same story as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's an entirely different story. It's one that I once heard longer than I would care to remember. We're talking about 50 years at least ago. Yeah, it was a long time ago. It was when I was a very little girl. I think I remember reading this. And so this is my first time to revisit it after a long time. So I'm reading that one to you today. So, shall we count up how many times I say so? Because I hear other people saying it and think, God, how irritating. So if I've irritated you with the number of times I say so, I do apologise, because I realise it's irritating myself. Anyway, the story I've got afterwards is called The Fairy. And I was asked by Gold Dust Woman if I would read some stories about fairies. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to split the dedication for this video. I'm dedicating Snow White and Rose Red to my friend Rea Snakespeare. Oh, hi Rea, how are you doing today, love? Hope you like the way I'm reading the story. And the story of the fairy I'm dedicating to Gold Dust Woman, because she's the one who asked me for it. So, hi Gold Dust Woman, hope you're doing fine today, and I hope you enjoy the story that I've chosen for you. So without further ado, please sit back, relax, as we go into our first story for our friend Rea, and this is Snow White and Rose Red by the Brothers Grimm. And I hope you all enjoy it. There was once a poor widow who lived in a lonely cottage. In front of the cottage was a garden wherein stood 2 rose trees, one of which bore white and the other red roses. She had 2 children who were like the 2 rose trees. One was called Snow White and the other one was called Rose Red. They were as good and as happy, as busy and as cheerful as ever 2 children in the world were. Only Snow White was a little bit more quiet and gentle than Rose Red. Rose Red liked to run about in the meadows and fields seeking flowers and catching butterflies. But Rose Red sat at home with her mother and helped her with the housework, or read to her when there was nothing to do. The 2 children were so fond of one another that they always held each other by the hand when they went out together. And when Snow White said, "We will not leave each other," Rose Red answered, "Never as long as we live." And their mother would add, "What one has, she must share with the other." They often ran about the forest alone and gathered red berries, and no beasts did them any harm, but came close to them trustfully. The little hare would eat a cabbage leaf out their hands, the roe grazed by their side, the stag leapt up merrily by them, and the birds sat still upon the boughs and sang whatever they knew. No mishap ever overtook them if they had stayed too late in the forest, and when night came on, they laid themselves down near one another upon the moss and slept until morning came, and their mother knew this, and she didn't worry on their account. Once when they had spent the night in the wood and the dawn had roused them, they saw a beautiful child in a shining white dress standing near their bed. He got up and looked quite kindly at them, but said nothing and went into the forest. And when they looked around, they found that they had been sleeping quite close to a precipice, and would have certainly fallen into it in the darkness if they'd only gone a few paces further. And their mother told them that it must have been an angel who looks after good children, and gold children. If there's such a thing as a gold child, then angels look after them as well. And we better not discriminate against silver children, copper-coloured children, bronze children, silver-plated or gold-plated children, or any other kind of child that has a composition of some kind of precious metal. You know, we've got to be so politically correct these days. All inclusive. Snow White and Rose Red kept their mother's cottage so neat it was a pleasure to look inside it. In the summer, Rose Red took care of the house and every morning laid a wreath of flowers by her mother's bed before she woke, in which was a rose from each tree. In the winter, Snow White lit the fire and hung the kettle on the hob. The kettle was of brass and shone like gold, so brightly that the way it was polished. In the evening, when snowflakes fell, the mother said, "Go, Snow White, and bolt the door." And then they sat around the hearth, and the mother took her spectacles and read aloud out of a large book. And the two girls listened as they sat and span. And close by them lay a lamb upon the floor, and behind them, upon a perch, sat a white dove with its head hidden beneath its wings. One evening, as they were sitting thus comfortably together, someone knocked at the door as if he wished to be let in. Isn't that why you knock on a door anyway? You don't knock on a door and then think, I wish they'd let me out of here. When you knock on a door, you want to get in, don't you? Or at least somebody answers the door. Sorry, I digress. The mother said, "Quick, Rose Red, open the door. It must be a traveller seeking shelter." Rose Red went and pushed back the bolt, thinking that it was a poor man, but it wasn't. It was a bear that scratched his broad black head within the door. Rose Red screamed and sprang back. The lamb bleated, the dove fluttered, and Snow White hid herself behind her mother's bed. But the bear began to speak and said, "Don't be afraid. I'll not do you any harm. I'm half frozen and only want to warm myself a little beside you." "Poor bear," said the mother. "Lie down by the fire and only take care that you don't burn your coat." Then she cried, "Snow White, Rose Red, come out. The bear will not do you any harm. He means well." So they both came out, and by the lamb and the dove came nearer and weren't afraid of him. The bear said, "Here, children, knock the snow out of my coat a little." So they brought the broom and swept the bear's hide clean, and he stretched himself by the fire and growled contentedly and comfortably. It wasn't long before they grew quite at home and played tricks with their clumsy guest. They tugged his hair with their hands, they put their feet on his back and rolled him about, or they took a hazel switch and beat him, and when he growled, they laughed. But the bear took it all in good part. Only when they were too rough he called out, "Leave me alive, children. Snow White, Rose Red, will you beat your word dead?" Okay. And when it was bedtime and the others went to bed, their mother said to the bear, "You can lie here by the hearth, and then you will be safe from the cold and the bad weather." And as soon as day dawned, the two children led him out, and he trotted across the snow into the forest. Henceforth the bear came every evening at the same time, laid himself down by the hearth, and let the children amuse themselves with him as much as they liked, and they got on so used to him that the doors were never fastened until their black friend had arrived. It's a black bear, right? You know. When spring had come and all outside was green, the bear said one morning to Snow White. Now I must go away and cannot come back for the whole summer. Where are you going then, dear bear? Asked Snow White. I must go into the forest and guard my treasures from the wicked dwarfs. In the winter, when the earth is frozen hard, they are obliged to stay below and can't work their way through. But now, when the sun has thawed and warmed the earth, they break through it and come out to pry and steal. And what once gets into their bare hands and into their caves doesn't easily see daylight again. Snow White was quite sorry at his departure, and as she unbolted the door for him, and the bear was hurrying out, he caught against the bolt, and a piece of his hairy coat was torn off, and it seemed to Snow White as if she had seen gold shining through it. But she wasn't sure about it. The bear ran away quickly and was soon out of sight behind the trees. A short time afterwards, the mother sent her children into the forest to get firewood. There they found a big tree which lay felled on the ground, and close by the trunk was something jumping backwards and forwards in the grass, but they couldn't make out what it was. And when they came nearer, they saw a dwarf with an old withered face and snow white beard a yard long. A yard's about a metre. It's about 3 feet 3 inches. So that's about 90 centimetres. Just trying to update the story for you all and keep it modern. The end of the beard was caught in a crevice of the tree, and the little fellow was jumping about like a dog tied to a rope and didn't know what to do. He glared at the girls with his fiery red eyes and cried, "Why do you stand there? Can you not come here and help me?" "What are you up to, little man?" asked Rose Red. "You stupid prying goose," answered the dwarf. "I was going to split the tree to get a little wood for cooking. This little bit of food that people get, is immediately burnt up with heavy logs. We don't swallow as much as you coarse, greedy folk. I'd just driven the wedge safely in, and everything was going as I wished, but the cursed wedge was too smooth and suddenly sprang out, and the tree closed so quickly that I couldn't pull out my beautiful white beard. So now it is tight and I cannot get away, and the silly, sleek, milk-faced things laugh. Oh, how odious are you!" The children tried very hard, but they couldn't pull the dwarf beard out. It was caught too fast. "I'll run and fetch someone," said Rose Red. "You senseless goose," snarled the dwarf. "Why would you fetch someone? You are already too many. Can you not think of something better?" "Don't be impatient," said Snow White. "I'll help you." And she pulled out the scissors out of her pocket and cut off the end of the beard. As soon as the dwarf felt himself free, he laid hold of a bag which lay amongst the roots of the tree and which was full of gold, and lifted it up, grumbling to himself, "Uncouth people, to cut off a piece of my fine beard, bad luck to you." And then he swung the bag on his back and went out without even looking at the children. Not even a thank you or a by your leave. Kiss my... How rude. That's all I can say. How rude. Some time afterwards, Snow White and Rose Red went to catch a dish of fish. And as they came across... I'll start again, shall I, when my words come out right? As they came near the brook, they saw something like a large grasshopper jumping backwards and forwards in the water, as if they were going to leap in. They ran to it and found it was the very self-same dwarf. You know, that rude one? "Where are you going?" said Rose Red. "You surely don't want to go into the water?" "I'm not such a fool," cried the dwarf. "Don't you see that the accursed fish wants to pull me in?" The little man had been sitting there fishing, and unluckily the wind had tangled up his beard with the fishing line. And a moment later a big fish made a bite, and the feeble creature had not the strength to pull it out. The fish kept the upper hand and pulled the dwarf towards him. He held on to all the reeds and rushes, but it was of little good, for he was forced to follow the movements of the fish and was in urgent danger of being dragged into the water. The girls came just in time. They held him fast and tried to free his beard from the line, but it was hopeless. The beard and the line were tangled fast together. There was nothing to do but bring out the scissors and cut the beard, whereby another small part of it was lost. When the dwarf saw what happened, he screamed out, "Is that civil, you toadstool, to disfigure a man's face? Was it not enough to clip off my end of my beard before? Now you've cut off the best part. I can't let myself be seen by my people. I wish you had been made to run the soles off your shoes." And then he took out a sack of pearls which lay in the rushes, and without another word he dragged it away and disappeared behind a stone. Well, it happened that soon afterwards the mother sent the two children to the town to buy needles and thread and laces and ribbons. Well, the road led them across a heath upon which huge pieces of rock lay strewn about, and there they noticed a large bird hovering in the air, flying slowly round and round above them. It sank lower and lower, and at last settled near a rock not far away. Immediately they heard a loud, piteous cry. They ran up and saw with horror that the eagle had seized their old acquaintance, the dwarf, and was going to carry him off. The children, full of pity, at once took tight hold of the little man and pulled against the eagle so long that at last he let his booty go. And as soon as the dwarf had recovered from his first fright, he cried with a shrill voice, "Could you not have done it more carefully? As you dragged at my brown coat so that it is all torn and full of holes, you clumsy creatures." Then he took up a sack full of precious stones and slipped away again under the rock into his hole. The girls, who by this time were used to his ingratitude, went on their way and did their business in town. Would you have given him as many chances? Because I don't think I would have done. I mean, have the eagle get him to fly away is a bit rough. Certainly didn't want him to drown. But I tell you what, after the first time I would have left him clipped to that tree. You'd just have to have sat there as far as I'm concerned. The ungrateful bugger. Sorry, that's just me though. As they crossed the heath again on their way home, they surprised the dwarf, who had emptied out his bag of precious stones on a clean spot, and hadn't thought that anyone would come there so late. The evening sun shone upon the brilliant stones. They glittered and sparkled all the colours so beautifully that the children stood still and just stared at them. "Why do you stand gaping there?" cried the dwarf, and his ashen grey face became copper red with rage. He was still cursing when a loud growling was heard, and a black bear came trotting towards them out of the forest. The dwarf sprang up in a fright, but he couldn't reach his cave, for the bear was already close. Then, in dread of his heart, he cried, "Dear Mr. Bear, spare me. I will give you all my treasures. Look, the beautiful jewels lying there. Grant me my life. What do you want with such a slender little fellow as I? You wouldn't feel me between your teeth. Come, take these two wicked girls instead of me. They are tender morsels for you, fat as young quails. For mercy's sake, eat them." Well, the bear took no heed of his words, but he gave the wicked creature a single blow with his paw, and he didn't move again. The girls had run away, but the bear called to them, "Snow White, Rose Red, don't be afraid. Wait, I'll come with you." Then they recognised his voice and waited, and when he came up to them, suddenly his bare skin fell off, and stood there a handsome man, clothed all in gold. "I'm a king's son," he said, "and I was bewitched by that wicked dwarf who had stolen all my treasures. I've had to run about the forest as a savage bear until I was freed by his death. Now he's got his well-deserved punishment. Well, Snow White got married to him, and Rose Red got married to his brother. And they divided between them the great treasure which the dwarf had gathered together in his cave. The old mother lived peacefully and happily with her children for many years. She took her 2 rose trees with her, and they stood before her window, and every year bore the most beautiful roses, white and red. The end. So what do you think of that then, Snow White and Rose Red? And that nasty little dwarf? Do you know what? I'm sure you know people like that in real life. You know, the sort of people that you try and do things for and they're never happy, are they? You know, you'd think they've got a permanent chip on their shoulder, and whatever you do, it's just, you should have done it yesterday, or shouldn't you have waited till another time? And all you're trying to do is help. And yet, if you don't help, you'll be got at. And when you do help, you're got at. So you can't win. So my advice is, go ahead and do it anyway. Because then you'll know you've done a good thing. And it's up to the other person to see that it is a good thing and learn a bit of gratitude. Because I wouldn't ignore them. You know, me, I'd do it just to spite them. Just to say, I'm going to do this good thing for you anyway. And if you don't like it, tough. You know. But, you know, there's just people like that in the world. They're just never happy, are they? Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about that. Rea, would you also please tell me what you think about your story? And if it measures up to, you know, without the ad-libs, obviously. But if it measures up to the one that you remember. And I do hope you enjoyed it. And everybody else. Now, this one is a story called The Fairy by Charles Perrault. And it's only a short one. It's not as long as the first one. But Goldust Woman, hi again, asked me for fairy stories. So I've actually found this one called The Fairy by Charles Perrault, and for Goldust Woman and anybody else who likes fairy stories, I really hope you enjoy it. Once upon a time there was a widow who had 2 daughters. The elder was so much like her, both in looks and character, that whoever saw the daughter saw the mother. They were both so disagreeable and so proud that there was no living with them. Now, the younger daughter, who was the very picture of her father for sweetness of temper and virtue, was withal one of the most beautiful girls ever seen. As people naturally love their own likeness, this mother doted on her elder daughter, and at the same time had a great aversion for the younger. She made her eat in the kitchen and work continually. Among other things, this unfortunate child had to go twice a day to draw water more than 1.5 miles away from the house and bring home a pitcher full of it. One day, as she was at this fountain, there came to her a poor old woman who begged of her to let her drink. "Oh, yes, with all my heart, good lady," said this pretty little girl. Rinsing the pitcher at once, she took some of the clearest water from the fountain and gave it to her, and she held up the pitcher all the while so she might drink that bit easier. The good woman, having drunk, said to her, "You are so pretty, so good and virtuous, and so courteous that I can't help but give you a gift." And she just threw off all the garments that made her look like a poor old woman, and she became a beautiful fairy. And the reason why she had dressed up like this was to see how far civility and good manners were in people. And she wanted to see how civil and good-mannered this particular girl was. "I will give you for a gift," continued the fairy, "that at every word you speak, there shall come out of your mouth either a flower or a jewel." When this pretty girl returned, her mother scolded her for staying out for so long at the fountain. "I beg your pardon, mamma," said the poor girl, "for not making more haste." And in speaking these words, came out of her mouth 2 roses, 2 pearls, and 2 large diamonds. "What is it this as I see?" said her mother, quite astonished. "I think pearls and diamonds came out of the girl's mouth. How happens this, my child?" This was the first time the girl had ever been called "my child." The girl told her frankly all the matter, not without dropping out great numbers of diamonds. "Truly," cried the mother, "I must send my own dear child thither. Fanny, look at what comes out of your sister's mouth when she speaks. Would you not be glad, my dear, to have the same gift? You only have to go and draw water out the fountain, and when a poor woman asks you to let her drink, give it to her very civilly." "I'd like to see myself going to the fountain to draw water. I want to see this for myself," said the girl, and she was very ill-bred. "I insist you shall go," said the mother, "and go now." Well, she went, but she grumbled all the way, taking with her the best silver tankard in the house. She had no sooner reached the fountain when she saw coming out of the wood a magnificently dressed lady, who came up to her and asked to drink. This was the same fairy who had appeared to her sister, but now she'd taken on the air and dress of a princess, to see how far this girl's rudeness would go. "Am I come here," said the proud girl, "to serve you water? I suppose this silver tankard was brought purely for your ladyship, was it? Oh, you may as well drink out of it if you want to." "You are scarcely polite," answered the fairy without anger. "Well, since you are so disobliging, I give you for the gift that every word you speak, there shall come out of your mouth a snake or a toad." So, as soon as her mother saw her coming, she ran out to greet her daughter, and she cried out, "Well, daughter?" "Well, mother?" answered the unhappy girl, throwing out of her mouth a viper and a toad. "Oh, mercy!" cried the mother. "What is it that I see? It's her sister who's caused all this, but she'll pay for it." And immediately she ran to beat her. The poor child fled away from her and went to hide herself in a forest nearby. The king's son, who was returning from the chase, met her, and seeing her so beautiful, asked her why she was there alone and why she cried. "Alas, sir, my mother has turned me out of doors." The king's son, who saw 5 or 6 pearls and as many diamonds come out of her mouth, desired her to tell him what had happened. Well, she told him the whole story, and the king's son fell in love with her, and also, considering that such a gift was worth more than any marriage portion a bride could bring, conducted her to the palace of the king, his father, and he married her there and then. As for her sister, she made herself so hated that her own mother turned her out of doors. The miserable girl, after wandering about and finding no one to take her in, went to a corner of the wood and died. And that's it. The end. So, moral of the story, that if you are well-mannered and nice to people, but really mean it, be genuinely nice and kind and do good things for people, then a jewellery shop should fall out your mouth, or a florist. But if you are unkind to people, and you're genuinely unkind, and every word you say to them is rotten and evil, then it looks like you're sort of like speaking as if you've just eaten all of the reptile house. Things like that, so. Okie dokie. Well, I know which one I'd rather have, but I don't think I want to talk to anybody with a mouthful of diamonds. I've never even wanted diamonds in my teeth, to be honest. Never seen the point of having, jewellery in your teeth. I'd be scared in case I swallowed it. And I'm certainly not going looking for it. It was a nice little story, that, don't you think? Nice and gentle with, your basic moral at the end of the story, which is, as I tend to always put it, you get more if you have a mouthful of vinegar. Do you know something? Honestly, one of these days, I'll turn around to you guys and I will say something that I don't have to garble. Right, let's start again. It's like a saying that I use a lot. You get more with a mouthful of honey than you do with a mouthful of vinegar. It's a saying along those lines. But basically, if you speak nicely to people, then they'll be nice to you. But if you talk to people and you're sour and you're rude and vulgar and what have you, then, you're going to get it back. So you give out what you get back, basically. Anyway, Gold Dust Woman, if you are here and you have heard this, please let me know if you enjoyed it. I will do more fairy stories in the future. Please don't worry about that. There's all sorts of mythical creatures that we can talk about in the world of folk tales and fairy tales. I think we're only basically skimming the surface. Right. Well, on that happy note, guys, I'm going to call this folk tales to a close for another week. I do hope you've enjoyed the stories. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for watching. I'll see some of you on Friday night for spooky stories. But until then, I'll see the rest of you very soon. Take care. Love you. Bye for now.